Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey friend, welcome to this episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Esther, and I'm here with my co-host, Holly. We are recording back-to-back today, so
Woo-hoo!
Welcome again, Holly.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. We're trying something new called batching recording because
We've done this in the past.
we have, but not within like the past year.
No.
Which is why we've struggled.
Yeah.
We have been on the struggle bus on recording episodes.
Yeah.
So we came together, we made a plan, and now we're implementing our plan.
Yeah. Here we go.
And we're
proud
doing
of
it.
us.
Yeah. All right. So today we are going to talk about how to create a message that people will listen to. Do you think that is an important thing, Holly?
I feel like we've done that for 200 and something episodes, or we've tried to.
We've tried to do this. We've tried to create episodes that people want to listen to.
Yeah.
We're talking more generally here today, but we're talking about, if you're a leader, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have something that you want to communicate to others and you want them to listen, right? Every day as a leader, you are communicating messages to people around you. And I know you don't want those messages to be ignored or for nothing to happen as a result. So it could be that you're writing emails, you're sharing a message from stage, you're speaking to a small group of people, or you're crafting a report to send to your leadership team. And in each of those scenarios and many, many more, you want your message to be effective. You want people to listen and respond, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you just like said something or sent an email and hoped nothing happened?
Not very often.
No. And this even relates to like communicating with people in our family, with our children, for example. If you're communicating to your child, you want what you say to be responded to and to be effective. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I think I could really use this episode because the message to use the hamper in the bathroom it's not clear, apparently.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and there is,
if you could help me craft that message better.
Maybe we will come up with something, Holly, during this episode where we can make sure.
It.
Okay. Yeah. When it comes to creating a message that other people will listen to, it's not as easy as it might seem. And we all communicate in different ways. We have different preferences, different habits, different methods, and I just even think about this, like, again, in how it relates to how we communicate in our families, but also online in groups of people. We have all developed different habits over the years of how we communicate. And a lot of times it's how we've been communicated to or how we've been trained or mentored. If we haven't had an experience where people have mentored us and trained us to learn and to grow in this skill, then we may be struggling to actually communicate effectively. So what I want to do today is I want us to have a way to develop this skill. And I have this practical acronym that I think might help us all in how we are communicating. So we're going to use the acronym CARS. And this is not about the Disney movie Cars. So
that's literally what I thought when you first told me.
It would be fun if I had some connection to that movie, but it's not that. It's just, when I sit down to come up with content, I am always thinking about how can I make this easy to remember or just, I love acronyms or alliteration, any of those things, right? It helps us to be able to communicate most effectively. So I'll tell you what the CARS stands for, and then we'll go through each of those words and kind of talk through questions that you can ask yourself to develop this message. And also let me say this. This is really about specifically when you get ready to communicate a thing. This is, I mean, yes, this does apply broadly, but we're talking about this today more specifically, like when I sit down to write an email or when I sit down to write a talk, an episode like this, when you get ready to create a report, like if you were going to communicate with one of your clients in your business, or you were going to communicate in your workplace to a particular, group of people, this acronym, this CARS method will help you to do that. So does that make sense, Holly, what I'm saying here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I think what you're saying is like, obviously broadly this works, but this is when you really want to have clear communication. And I think you want a result, right?
Yeah.
Like you are doing this to elicit either a response, feedback, or a specific action. You want something to happen.
Yeah.
And so these are the steps to get there.
Yeah. It's about being intentional and purposeful, which we talk about a lot in our podcast. As a leader, we don't just want to be like willy-nilly and kind of sporadic about how we're sharing messages and communication. And so, this is going to help us be intentional with what we're saying and how we're saying it. So, CARS. Here's the acronym. C is for clarity. A is for audience. R is for relevance. And S is for simplify. So we will go through each of these words. We have some questions that you can ask yourself as you're creating your message that you want to share with someone. And it will help you to develop your message and also refine your message and what you want to say.
I'm excited about this. I think this is super good.
Okay. Yay. It's going to be practical. All right. So let's dive into the first one, clarity. So the questions we need to ask when we get to this part is, first of all, what do I want to say? Like, what is this about? Right.
Right.
Very important to know what you want to say. The second question is, what is my goal for this communication? And I think that's kind of what you were saying, Holly, before. Like, you want to know what you want as a result of this communication that you are doing. So do you want to just inspire someone? Like if you're preparing a talk that you want to give at a retreat or at an event, you may just want to inspire someone to some form of a future action, right? Yeah. Or maybe you want to get someone to respond to the email.
Yeah.
You might want to be, maybe you're wanting to communicate something that results in you getting a raise or getting some other, actual result, tangible result.
Yeah.
So what's the goal for my communication? What do I want someone to do as a result of receiving this information? So that's very connected to the last one, but sometimes they might be different. Like your goal of the communication could be different from what you actually want someone to do as a result of receiving the information. When you ask these questions, it's going to help you get clear about what you're saying and how you want to say it. So do you have any other thoughts on this one, Holly, as far as like how to get clarity or why this might be helpful for you?
Yeah, I think as I was just kind of thinking about it, I think as a sort of young communicator, I didn't so much do the clarity thing really good. I just am thinking about like, when I was like working in certain areas and with like different bosses and different things. And I think a lot of things did not go as I would have wanted because I was not clear.
Yeah.
And so I think that especially if you're kind of have an emotional response to things, these are really good questions to stop and be like, okay, why what's the goal of the communication? I think for me is like the most important one out of these three. Like they're all really important, but for
Yeah.
me, when I'm thinking about that, like what's the goal here? And I think you can immediately tell when someone doesn't have clarity, like
Yeah.
when they're writing, because oftentimes it's long, it's kind of long and winding road, right?
Hmm.
And like I think that there's so much more trust gained in a relationship, whether it's, business audience or, leader, manager, employee sort of thing. This is a place where you can gain trust with people because they know exactly what you're looking for. They know exactly, most often they know how to respond because you've been clear. So I think
Yeah.
clarity is huge. And I'm really glad that this is the first one because I think so many things have gone awry because people were not clear about either
Yeah.
what they wanted to say, the reaction or the action that they needed to have happen.
Right.
So I think this is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what we don't give enough credit to is the preparation of the message. And again, this doesn't have to be in relation to you getting up and giving a talk somewhere. Like I think that's what we most often think about when we think about sharing a message. But
Yeah.
even when I'm formulating an email, you know, it's so easy just to like you said, like emotionally respond in the moment to a situation,
Mhm.
whether it's an email or whether it's a text or even in person. And it's okay to give yourself permission to
Mhm.
take a minute and think through this.
Yeah.
And if you're in a conversation, let's say at work or, with your spouse, even like, and you realize you're getting emotionally charged, that's often, like you said, what when we say something we really wish we wouldn't have said.
Mhm.
And so we might need to say, you know what, I really want to take a minute. I want to take some time to think about this and get back to you. If it's somebody at work and it's a situation that's causing some stress, you know, hey, thank you for asking me about that. I'd like to take some time and get back to you. Can I get back to you tomorrow? And that will it gives you space and time to think about this.
Mm.
And then when it comes to creating a message, like if you are going to give a talk, when I sit down to write a talk or prepare for sharing some form of message, it is very messy at first. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
figuring out what do I want to say often looks completely chaotic
Mhm. Yep.
because you might need to write out or talk out everything that's in your head about what you want to say before you get to what you really want to say, you
Yeah.
know? But if you
Well,
just write down everything you want to say and you don't go through those next couple questions, when you get up to share your message, it's going to be unclear,
yeah.
right? It's going to be a big mess. But if you take the time to ask those other questions of what's the goal and what do I want someone to do, then you're probably going to be able to weed out and edit out a lot of the stuff that you've got in the initial kind of brain dump.
Well, it makes me think of that whole idea of like, if you want me to speak for 45 minutes, I need 5 minutes of prep. If you want me to speak for 15 minutes, I need 8 hours of prep. If you
Yeah.
want me to speak for 3 minutes, I'm going to need like a week of prep, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about editing, it's about clarifying the
Yeah.
message, it's about removing all the junk and like, what am
Mm-hmm.
I distilling this down to, right? So I
Yeah.
can easily talk for 45 minutes and we'll get there,
Yeah.
like, and it'll probably be in there. But to distill something down to something really, really clear and succinct and on point for the goal is often much harder to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that made me
Okay.
think of that.
All right. Let's go to the second point, which is audience. This is about knowing who you're speaking to. So, okay, first question, who am I speaking to? Wow, that's
So good.
really brain. I mean, some of this is like so simple, but it's just like we just don't do it, right?
Yeah,
We
it's
just
true.
don't. again, I'm hoping that this acronym and this method is just going to give you a framework for how to filter what you're saying and how you're saying it. So who am I speaking to? And then to follow up on that, what is their level of understanding of this topic? Right? So if we're going to share a message, let's say this is completely hypothetical because I've never done this, but I'm going to teach on the book of Revelation. Okay. And I'm going to teach to a small group that are people that have been Christians for 25 years, and they have all been studying Revelation for the past year. Okay. If I have that group of people versus a group of teenagers who have barely cracked open the book of Revelation and never read it, it's helpful for me to know their level of understanding of the topic before I start getting super deep into what I'm going to share. So, can you think of a time where you have needed to understand someone's level of understanding of a topic when you're sharing a message or a communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of it kind of plays into when like I've been speaking or when I had spoken in the past at like business things. I think one of the questions I always asked, especially when I was speaking to like a group of people or maybe like a webinar or like some sort of like webcast thing or whatever, like where are these people at in business, right?
Yeah.
Like, are these people just starting? Are these people, do they have 5, 6, 7-figure businesses? Or are they like CEOs of like multinational corporations, right? Like, who am I talking to? Because I'm not going to talk to a C-suite level corporate person about the basics of mission, vision, values, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's already hardcore baked probably into their corporate. They want much more sophisticated conversation. So, that was always a level of question or like a point of question that I would ask whenever I was asked to speak with anything business wise. So,
yeah. And the third question that you can ask is, what kind of context do I need to provide for this information to make sense? So again, based on once you know who you're speaking to and you have a general idea of what their understanding of your topic or your overarching theme is, then you can figure out how much context or background do you need to give for that message to make sense. And, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I feel like a lot of this is actually really kind of in line with biblical principles of communication and the way that Jesus communicated. Because, he often, if you read the Gospels through the lens of communication, it's really interesting. And you'll start to pick up on some of the things that Jesus did. And I actually have a whole episode about how Jesus communicated. So you can listen to that one if you want to learn more about that. But like, he really catered his message to who he was speaking to. And if he was speaking to his disciples, right, he talked differently to them than he did to the big crowds. And you'll start to see just like where he gives more context or explanation versus where he just goes right to the point. And so I think that's something that we can just learn from and take into consideration as we think through this. But again, like some of my examples are things not to do. So,
I want to hear them just as much. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever been in a situation? I just think of church announcements because I think this is just such an obvious place where we can pick up on the importance of context.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're sitting in a church, like we have visited churches since we moved from Maine to Tennessee, and we've been in situations, and I was in this situation even in our church back in Maine, like where the person giving the announcement is sort of making an assumption that people have certain information when they give the announcement. And so it may be like, hey, we have this women's retreat coming up, and oh, you guys know it's such an amazing retreat. The women always learn so much. And and if you want to know more about the retreat, go talk to Holly after the service.
Right.
Okay. If I'm a new person, I do not have enough context about I've never heard how amazing the retreat is. I don't know any details about the retreat.
Mhm.
I don't know who Holly is. I do not. Now, I am not going to take the action that you just asked me to
Yeah.
take because I don't have the context or the background that you're assuming that I had when that
Yeah.
announcement was made. Right?
It's not effective unless Holly is wearing a sandwich board that says, "My name is Holly. Talk to me about this amazing retreat." And on the
Right.
back, there's all the like benefits and stuff.
Yeah. Right. And so again,
Yeah.
this is just like it's the curse of knowledge that we have. And I don't know who came up with that phrase, the curse of knowledge, but it's something that I learned way early in my business days. One of my
Mhm.
mentors used this phrase and I loved it because what she explained was like, generally speaking, what you know is more than what you think you know about
Yeah.
anything, right? So for you, Holly, your knowledge, your level of knowledge about finances and business is much higher than probably what you give yourself credit for.
Yeah.
And my level of knowledge of marketing and communication is probably higher than what I think it is. When
Mm.
I'm talking to someone who doesn't have that background, I need to be cognizant of that in order to be an effective conveyor of a message. And
Mm.
so my tip for you in this, when we think about our audience and who we're speaking to, is take what you think they know and drop it down a level or two.
Mm.
You're always going to be more effective if you speak more simply and you make things more simple than if you're way over someone's head, you've
Mm.
lost it. You've lost people. And I'm not saying to be patronizing or like talking to people like they're dumb. Like that's not
Yeah.
what I want us to do.
Condescending. Yeah.
Condescending. But what we do want to do is we want to really be as cognizant of the people that we're speaking to and recognize like how can we say what we want to say to that group of people in an effective way and be aware of what context or background they might need to have in order for our message to land and for them to take the action that we want them to take.
Well, and I think that it really comes down to like, is it digestible by the audience? And like, I think that that very clearly kind of speaks to the verses in the Bible that talk about like how a baby drinks milk versus like an adult can eat meat.
Yeah.
And so, like that is a way of knowing your audience. Like a baby you can't just slap a steak in front of a baby and expect them to be able to get nourishment from it. So, but an adult could probably drink milk, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that it's all about understanding how people can digest, and you want people to be able to actually be able to take in the information. I mean, I know that like when for example, when we started like looking to buy a house, I was like, none of it all this stuff looked like a different language, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was clearly in English, but like I had no understanding of some of the stuff that goes into buying a house. And so like it was very important that like our loan officer, our mortgage person, our realtor and like the
Yeah.
lawyer, like they all communicated to us in a way that we understood. And it's not because we're not smart or whatever. I just have zero experience with that.
Yeah.
And although it's a language that I could like practically understand, it's also going to take me a lot longer too.
Yeah.
Like you might be able to helping people to arrive more quickly to a conclusion or to a piece of knowledge by understanding where they're at.
Yeah.
Rather than letting them do it on their own as well. So
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So the R, let's go to R, and this is relevance. I think this is really probably the most important one of the four. So why does this matter to the person reading or hearing this information?
Yeah.
It's when you ask the question, so what? Okay. So I'm getting ready to give a presentation at work and I I'm a content marketer, which means I help develop the content strategy for the type of articles that we write for our business unit. And I help develop it, create the strategy, it gets written, and then I report on the results and I look at the numbers and I get the data and I bring all this. And I can send a report or an email to my leaders, giving them the report and the data. But if I don't put a so what in there, it's just going to be ignored, right?
Yeah.
And this is what happens so many times. We give people information and we give people a message, but we don't think about why it matters to them and why they should care. So if we don't incorporate that into our message, it's not going to land. It's not going to matter to them. They're just going to ignore it. And they're going to start to sort of tune you out whenever you share anything, which is not what you want, right?
Yeah. I think that, like, I mean, to kind of go back to the house example, like we've heard a lot of stuff about buying a house prior to when we were actually ready to buy, but I just like kind of let it go in one ear and out the other, because at that point we just weren't ready, or it wasn't the right time or whatever. And then when it finally became a decision that we were going to make, like I was actually listening very intently and digesting that information. So yeah, relevance is super duper important. And I mean, I think to some extent, when you're talking business or leadership, whatever, there's a lesson in there as well. Like sometimes people aren't ready, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak your message anyway, because there's no, like, there have been times when I've recalled back to either sermons or things that I've listened to that I was like, oh, I didn't get it at the time, and now I get it. So I don't know if that's like going outside of relevance, but like I think that, sometimes we're like primed, right, for this really relevant and like it's really going to hit home with us. And then other times it's not as much. And so I think it's just good to remember that sometimes people are not in the exact best place to hear, but we're going to craft the message in a way that almost is so succinct, and we've thought about all these other things that when they do finally kind of hit that point of relevance, it's easy to recall.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we didn't say this before, but really it is important to remember that, even though you might have a goal for your message and you might have something that you want to happen as a result of your message, ultimately we don't control what other people do or say, or, so like, but when you are intentional about that goal and you're intentional about the response you're hoping for, you are more likely to get there than if you just sort of are random about it. And in the so what part of this, in the relevance part of your message, the thing that you can do is as you're reading your message back to yourself, or you're saying it out loud, you're practicing, you can basically ask yourself that question. You can say, if I was listening to this, so what? Like, why would I care about this? And a few things that you can do is when you're thinking about your main points of your message, it's like, okay, maybe it's like, I want to ask for a budget increase for this thing in our budget at work. Right. And then I end that with, so that, da, 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 da. Like I have a so that.
Right.
And that's where I'm bringing in the relevance, so that we are able to increase our reach in this platform by X amount, right? So there's like a so that, or a so what. So that's an easy way to kind of make sure that you are doing that part of your message.
Yeah.
Okay. Our last one is simplify. So this is, again, super important, and we've already kind of hit on it, but we're just going to really bring it home here. Can you take what you want to communicate and simplify it? Can you edit it down to make it clearer to speak to your intended audience more effectively. So, like I said in the beginning, in the first point of what you want to say, the clarity of what you want to say, now you've gone through these other letters and now it's like, okay, can I simplify it even more? Can I make it even more clear? What do I need to take out? What's maybe confusing about my message that if I take out, it'll be easier for someone to understand?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest mistakes that we make as communicators, I think you mentioned, like as a young communicator earlier on, probably in our careers, we tend to think that giving more information is better.
Yeah.
And we just do more and more and more. And we want 10
Mm-hmm.
points and we want to really, just give as much value as we can
Yeah.
when we are saying something or communicating something. And what that does is it just confuses people.
Mm.
We try to
Yeah.
give them too much information and it confuses people and they get overwhelmed and they walk away and they don't do anything.
Yeah.
So when we edit things down and make things simpler, we are more likely to have people remember the message or take action on the message.
I think that like this really makes me think of, and maybe this is too niche, but whenever I have heard people talk about like website pages or whatever, like there's a clear call to action, right? Like that's something that is talked about a lot in, like paid, like sales pages and web pages and that sort of thing. And so I think that this really makes me think of that because whatever information you are giving the person, they should not have to do an extra step to be able to take action on it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like that's one thing that you sort of talk about. Do they have to click here to then get to the buy now button, or do they have to do this to then, like, we want to make it like so simple for people to be able to take action, and especially when it's a result that you want. Like, for example, you're looking for a raise. Like, well, if I put myself in the shoes of the manager and I, give this really long, like super narrative explanation of all these things,
Yeah.
they have to pluck out the
Mm-hmm.
pieces and points of like how it fits to the vision or how like it actually benefits the department or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm able to really simplify that down, it makes it so much easier for a decision to be made or an action to happen because I've taken all the work out of it. So you basically want to take out all of the steps, the extra steps that the listener or the person in charge, whoever
Mm-hmm.
you're talking to, has to make so that they can then do the thing or respond in the way that you want them to.
Yeah.
And the more that you muddy it, the less effective the action is going to be, or the less likely, I guess, the action is going to actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is kind of like making me think of something that's just a super practical example. So I'm going to say it because it might be helpful for anyone in their work, in their ministry, whatever they're doing. Something that I hear from people sometimes is, oh, I was really clear with my communication and I didn't get a response.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about this, like, let's say you sent an email and you gave a report, you provided some information, and then you said, let me know what you think. And you signed off, right? Versus you sent this report, you gave this information, and you responded and said, could you reply by the end of day Tuesday with any feedback for this report, right? Or like a very specific call to action or a request for a response. Or if I don't hear back by end of day Tuesday, I'll assume we're ready to move forward on this project.
Yeah.
Right. Or like something that is like so clear and simple, and you're only asking them to do one thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to get that clear and that specific with our response because we give these generalized, vague kind of requests and it's not clear and it's not simple for people. So again, it's not about like talking down to people or treating people like they're dumb, but it's about being as specific and as clear as we can in our communication and in our messaging that someone knows exactly what they need to do next.
Yeah, I really like the simplification of the question at the end. Like,
Yeah.
rather than saying, can you give me feedback?
Mm.
Like, I'm really feeling good about parts 1 and 3, but I really need help with parts 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And how do you think I should end it? Or how do you think my
Mm-hmm.
conclusion was, or whatever? Like, I think that is so much more simplified. And frankly, as a person that gets overwhelmed by things easily, like when someone is like, oh, okay, I don't like when I read a question like that, it's so much easier for me to respond quickly to
Yeah.
get it off my plate. If I have to respond to the whole big thing, I'm going to have to take way longer. I'm going to have to really process it. I'm going to have to, you know what I mean? When I'm
Mm-hmm.
asked a lot of questions or whatever, it's so much harder to get back to someone because it's like, I have to be just as comprehensive in my reply as they were in their first message to me.
Yeah.
So I really like the idea of simplifying even the question or the call to action, making that as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Is really
Yeah.
good.
Yep. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to recap our words just to remind everybody what we've talked about. So the C is clarity. So we want to make sure we're clear about what we're saying. A is audience. We want to know who we're speaking to. R is relevance. We want to make sure it matters to the people that we are speaking to. And then S is simplify. We want to really edit down and simplify our message as much as possible. When you run your message through this acronym and you ask yourself these questions, you are going to be more effective as a communicator and with your message. And it's more likely to produce the results that you want it to. This is not an exact science. It's a bit of an art and a science. So you can use this acronym, but you also are going to learn what works best for you as you practice this. And just remember that the biggest mistake most of us make when we are communicating is that we're trying to say too much. We're trying to put too many things in one message. And we think that when we provide more information, it's better. And the opposite is usually true. Usually less is more. And when we can simplify, when we can cut things back and make things even more clear and more succinct, we're probably going to be more effective. So we hope that this has been helpful for you. And I think this is actually going to be a shorter episode than usual, Holly.
Oh.
I mean, is it possible that we had a shorter episode today?
So less is more, not more
Less
is
is more.
We're trying to
Yeah.
embody what we're telling people.
Right. Yeah. And, I mean, this doesn't mean that everything that you say or do has to be 5 minutes. Like, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
This will apply whether you're doing something that is a full day project versus even just a 3-minute conversation. But the principles are what we are caring about here.
Yeah.
So we hope this is helpful, and take this, practice it. Let us know what you think. We would love to hear back from you if you found this as a practical tool that you can use. And if you use it, hey, leave us a review. We'd love to know.
All right.
Okay.
Are you ready for our fun question?
Here we go. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the question today is, if you had to choose one dessert to have for the rest of your life, what would it be and why? Now, when Esther first asked the question, I had to have clarity because I really needed to make sure that the dessert was not the only thing I had to eat for my whole life, because I would have to think a little bit more in depth about that.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Yeah.
But just for dessert.
If you only could have one dessert at any time you wanted dessert, it was just this one thing for the rest of your life. What would it be?
Do you have the answer for
I mean, I do. It feels very, very silly, but
really?
I don't know.
Well,
it's very basic. It's a chocolate chip cookie.
Oh my gosh.
Chocolate chip cookie is my favorite, most, just I love that. If I just could have Yeah. There's other desserts that I really love, but they're like super rich and super
Mm,
just like decadent. And I feel like
yeah.
I would get sick of it if I had
Yeah.
that as the only dessert for the rest of my life. So I'm going with
Okay.
chocolate chip cookie, just
But does it
basic.
have to be? Can't you just say cookies?
Oh,
Like,
well,
leave yourself some wiggle room there.
okay. I mean, I guess I could say cookies in general.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I do like a variety of cookies for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So
Okay. That
that's
makes me feel better. I
really
could have a
funny
different kind of cookie.
because my answer was going to be cookies.
Oh,
But I have to tell you, I'm wondering if your other dessert that you were contemplating it with is
okay.
the same as mine.
Oh,
Mi-
I don't think so.
oh no? Okay, mine
What
was
you
going to be
say?
cheesecake.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Like
See,
because all the varieties, right?
okay.
But that
Okay.
is too rich to have every
Yeah.
single time.
So mine was going to be, again, I went very specific. You went
Okay.
broad, I went specific.
Yeah. Well, I want
I
some
was going
wiggle
to
room.
say the black tie mousse cake from Olive Garden,
Oh,
which
okay.
is a form, I think
Yeah.
it would be in the cheesecake family,
Okay.
essentially.
Do you know what other answer would give us some really good wiggle room would be pie?
Yeah. See, that would not be in my, that's definitely
No?
not. No,
Oh, I
I'm
like
not as
pie.
into pie as other people.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, do
I'm
you
really
want to know
not.
something funny that I found in the South? And you tell
Okay.
me if you've
Yeah.
noticed it. And maybe it's just our little tiny region of the South, but
Okay.
whenever I've gone to like a restaurant or anywhere that has pie, it's always a cream pie. There's
Oh,
never ever a fruit pie. It's always
what?
like coconut cream or chocolate cream or Italian or whatever, or like
Wow.
banana pudding, banana cream pie, whatever that is.
Ugh.
That's like a big one.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the north,
Yeah.
ours are like our like
Fruit
front and centers
berries.
are
Yeah.
the fruits, like
Yeah.
apple pie, raspberry pie, blueberry pie, like
Yes.
so yeah, it's weird.
Interesting.
Have you noticed
Okay.
that or is that just
I
me?
don't think I've really looked at the dessert menus
Well,
at Southern restaurants super closely.
well, I
Uh,
think part of the reason I do that is because obviously like I used to have a cake business, so I'm
yes.
super interested in what's on like
Right.
what people are selling
People
for
baking.
desserts.
Yeah.
Like I find it really interesting.
Right.
From like a business perspective, which is
Mm-hmm.
so weird, but like
Oh,
yeah,
that's so funny. I mean, I will eat pie like at holidays. I like
yeah,
pies, but it's not a dessert. Now, my husband loves pie. Like he would love
yeah,
for us to have pie
mhm,
on the regular, but I don't make pie very often. So we
yeah.
don't have it that often.
You know, for someone that actually bakes a lot, pie crust is not something I can make.
Yeah.
Can
I
you
mean,
make
I've
it?
done it, but I usually just buy the Pillsbury.
It's hard. It's really hard
It's
to
hard to
make
get
pie
it the right
crust.
consistency and to get it the right shape when you roll it out, like all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's and not
Mm,
to be tough.
yeah.
Because if you knead it too much, it'll get tough
Yeah.
and it won't taste good. It's
Hmm.
really pie crust is hard, man.
My grandmother makes amazing pie. And so it's like, that's kind of like she's the pie person in our family, I
Mhm.
feel like. So I
Yeah.
just have relied on her pies to get us
Well,
through.
I
But
like the fact that we both chose the same dessert
I mean,
because
that's pretty
then
cool.
we can make
Cookies.
cookies and just be
Yeah.
good together.
So I love chocolate chip cookies, but then there's other types of cookies. Do you want to just tell me like a couple of your
Yeah.
favorite cookies?
Yeah. White chocolate macadamia.
Oh,
Love
okay.
it.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I like oatmeal chocolate chip,
Oh,
not
okay.
oatmeal
Okay.
raisin. Don't come at me with
No.
your raisins. No, get out of here. And then um is a whoopie pie a cookie? No, that's
Uh,
its own thing.
I don't think it's a cookie. Yeah, it's gonna be
Okay, then we can't talk about that.
yeah. 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 Okay.
What's your other cookie?
So other ones that are in my top are like I like a butter cookie, like a butter-based
Oh,
cookie. Like
yeah.
the at Christmas I make them. I don't know why I only make them at Christmas, but like they're called Mexican wedding cakes or
Oh,
what's the
yeah.
Russian tea cakes. I don't know why there's different names
Mm,
for them, but they're like a butter
yeah.
cookie that's got walnuts in it and it's like a ball and covered in
Those are
powdered
really
sugar.
good.
So yummy. And then I also love peanut butter balls, which I count in the cookie
Oh, you
family.
do?
Hmm.
See, I think a no bake is its own
No,
category.
it's a cookie.
Are
It's
you
in the cookie
serious?
family. No
What?
bakes. Yes,
No,
no bake cookies.
a
People
cookie is
call them no
cooked.
bake cookies.
No,
You type in your Google search.
a cookie is cooked. It's in the word.
Oh,
It's
well,
like in the bars, no bake region. Like, see, then you're really, because then is a bar a cookie?
no, but a no bake is not a bar.
I understand that, but I could put regular cookie dough into an 8x8 pan, and then it's a bar. Is it a bar or a cookie at that point?
It's a cookie bar. I don't know. I think we're overthinking it.
Oh, yeah, maybe we have not simplified.
We didn't simplify that question, but now I really want to eat and I'm hungry.
I know.
And now it's lunchtime, but I just want to eat cookies. So
Cookies.
Great.
Yes.
Great plan.
Yeah, that was probably not good on the forethought for us.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, thank you, friend, for being with us today. We hope you loved this episode. Be sure to leave us a review if you found this one helpful. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving us a rating and review in your podcast app? This helps more women just like you find the podcast, and it also helps them to know whether the podcast would be a good fit for them. Just go to the show in your podcast app, then scroll down until you see the option for ratings and reviews. From there, you can tap to rate and write a review. It means the world to us when you take a couple minutes to do this, and thank you so much to everyone who has left a review. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.
Now I see it.
You see it? Okay.
Sorry. It's like there's like
it's like in my
bubble.
Yeah,
next to your
it's backwards on my screen, which is really weird.
Oh, it's
like,
backwards?
It's backwards, not up in the corner, but like I can see it by my head, but it's backwards.
That's really
I don't know
weird.
why. It's almost weird. It's almost weird.
Well,
okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.